So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming out. I'm here specifically to talk about the teacher salaries here in the district, especially as it relates to the school budget, that the school district budget that has to be decided on by the school board pretty soon. I want to start off by saying that I have been listening to teachers since I've been back in the district since 2018. When I came back here in 2018 as CFO and started working on the budget for fiscal year 19, Bill Brigman, the HR director, says, Don, we need to do something about teacher salaries. At that time, the starting salary for a teacher in Charleston County was $36,000. So I began to take a look at the financial realities and what we could do, and I committed to Bill and to the school board that we would develop a 3-year plan to increase teacher salaries from $36,000 to $40,000, and that's exactly what we did. And since then, we have increased salaries up to a minimum start of $43,146. Now, obviously, that is not enough to support our teachers here in this expensive place called Charleston, South Carolina. So with me are teachers here. We have teachers from different groups. Teachers of the Year, they have been working with me for a full year on a number of things, including teacher salaries. We had the teacher salary task force that presented to the board. They presented a starting salary of a request of $58,000 per teacher. And then we have the members of the leaders of the Charleston County Education Association, which represents teachers also. So I've been listening to all of these groups and other groups about what the needs are here. And just this afternoon, with the Board's Audit and Finance Committee, I made a recommendation to that committee. Hopefully that committee will take to the full board. That'll be for next year, fiscal year 24, starting July 1, that we will increase teacher salaries to a starting of a minimum of $50,000. Now, there's not a pathway forward for fiscal year 24 from a financial standpoint to increase salaries to $58,000. But at the same time, we are going to present to the board a pathway over the next 4 years, this year coming up plus 3, to see whether or not we can get teacher salaries up to $58,000. So $50,000 is what's being recommended. There's ways to get there. There are 3 ways that we have to do that. We have to rely on state revenues. State revenues are not enough to cover that. We have to rely on reductions in some of the expenditures that we have. The staff has been working on that, both in terms of non-salary expenditures, as well as salary expenditures in the central office. And then the third way is through local millage increase with taxes. And so the state funding formula, the EFA funding formula, assumes that counties like Charleston County, which is the richest county in the state of South Carolina, we would assume a bigger share of educating our kids than compared to a poor county. And so that's what this budget is based on, being to make sure that we support teachers at $50,000 with a plan, hopefully, to get to $58,000 over the next 3 to 4 years, and then making the adjustments that we need to with the budget reductions as well as the tax increases. It's a lot in this budget. We have 3 priorities. Now, I won't go through all the details of the priorities. The one priority I talked about, the biggest priority, teacher salaries. That's number 1. Number 2, the central office staff has spent an enormous amount of time this spring working with all of our principals, listening to our principals, trying to understand what their needs are. We asked them to take their work in their schools, align their goals with the district goals of getting kids reading on grade level by 2027 and making sure that kids are able to do math as they go into to the middle schools and high schools, and also make sure we get kids college and career ready. So we asked them to do that. They did that, and we listened to them, said, in order to do it, these are the things that we need. These are the things that we need support from, and most of those cost money, and so that's a part of the budget priority. So priority number 2 is make sure that we support the school principals and their staff with the things that they need to get our Vision 2027 realized. And the third one is more of a technical piece I won't go into right now, but the message here is that $50,000 for teachers next year, and I believe, based on analysis that my team and I have done, that we have a path to get there. So what questions do you have?
teacher salaries are improving, but the disparities and achievement gap doesn't seem to improve. That doesn't seem to be improving. With respect to all of that, your intentions and relative to the upcoming candidate search, superintendent candidate search, and can you make any improvements in between teachers and student achievement?
Well, I've been in this role now since January of last year, and I will say this: although I've only been in this role since January of last year, when I was the 4 years preceding that, my job, everybody thinks of me as finance guy, and my job title was Chief Financial and Administrative Officer. So the administrative piece, I did a lot of research about what's working in the country, where it's working, why it's working, and what are the strategies that we could potentially adopt here to make make improvements for our kids. For the prime example I give is the state of Mississippi. Uh, uh, 10 years ago, Mississippi was number 50 on the list of all states in student achievement. In 2014, they hired a state superintendent, Dr. Carrie Wright, and she, in 8 years, she just retired from over there June last year. In 8 years, she moved her state from 50th in the nation to 35th. That is tremendous growth. So that proves to me that we have the ability to be able to improve student achievement. And so specifically what I've done with my staff and I, we've contracted with Dr. Wright, and we are actually replicating here in Charleston many of the strategies that she used statewide in Mississippi. So the interim assessments that we just gave in the spring, they're showing positive results. And so based on those results, we expect to have positive improvements when the state tests are given, I think, beginning next week.
Do you plan to be a part of that as a candidate for the superintendent's job?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we all saw what the profile that the board adopted with the BWP associates. So I will put in an application. Well, I'm going to be a part of that or not, I don't know. I've always considered myself a public servant from my military days and from my work with defense contractors and into K-12. And so my work is to make sure that as I get to this point in my life and going through this point in my life, that I adhere to that commitment that I made years and years ago to be a public servant. And so what I'm here to do is to support the growth of our kids in Charleston County.
Yes, this is designed to keep teachers in CCSD, and if so, how will this retain teachers in the district?
So it's definitely designed to recruit and retain teachers. I mean, I've heard teachers say it's difficult to be able to live here. And so when I say $50,000, it's not just for across the board. So it's a step or an incremental approach. We recognize that the recruiting is a big problem, and so the teacher salary schedule that we propose is heavy in the first 4 years to entice people to come into the teaching profession, and it becomes heavy also in the middle part of a teacher's career to entice them to remain in the profession. So recruiting and retention is a major part, or are a major parts of this proposed salary increase.
So when talking to teachers since the beginning of the pandemic, it's not just pay that they've been lacking, but also just respect in the communities that they serve. So from your position, how are you ensuring that teachers are not only getting that increased pay, but also the increased respect from the peers?
Some of that is related to the culture that we live in right now. And so I think a lot of that is incumbent upon us as a community and people in the community, entities in the community. Now, for us here in the district, it's not just teacher salary increases. Teachers have said that they don't have enough what they call planning time. So I'm a busy person. I have a lot of meetings on my schedule, but also every day I have time. I can sit down at my desk and I can think. Whereas a lot of our teachers, especially at the elementary level, they just run from class to class to class. They don't have that time. So in this budget, or I think it's $1.3 million to be able to bring in other people to give relief to teachers so they can have that time to sit down and plan and think. The workforce or the task force talked about teachers, the cost of housing. I was at a function family festival at West Ashley Middle School South Saturday, And I saw Mayor Tecklenburg, and he talked about the Union Pier and the work that's being done there, the redevelopment. And I've already talked with the CEO of the Ports Authority about how do we, if we're going to redevelop, how do we make sure we have workforce housing that is specific to our teaching force? So you're right, there are other things, and we are paying attention to those. But again, the community has to recognize that teachers deserve respect. They are shaping the future for our kids and hence for our community and for our country.
Specifically, you're recommending the 7.1 millage out of all the scenarios that are on the table, but included in that is the $5.8 million use of balance fund. Can you clarify what that fund is, where that money would come from?
So fund balance. It's like a savings account in a family. So a family has revenue coming in, or salaries coming in, and in a lot of families, hopefully, they will set aside money for contingencies in the future. Something may happen. They may want to build a house. That may be an emergency, so it's an emergency fund. And so a fund balance is a reserve fund that's set aside for certain purposes. And so what we've done in this budget, we're saying that we believe that we need to reduce that fund. The fund right now is about $160 million, $158 million. We're saying that we need to reduce that fund by $5.4 million to help balance this budget, to help with these teacher salary increases.
You mentioned that this is a recommendation to the committee. Do you think they will follow through with your recommendation?
So the task force, the teacher task force, made a powerful presentation to the full school to the school board, and so the school board members have told me they heard what the task force said. They recognize that there's a big challenge in Charleston for livability for our teachers, and so what I presented to the committee is a way to get there. And so it's an iterative process. The committee will meet again before the first reading of the budget on May 22nd. They'll have tons of questions. They had questions this afternoon. They'll have more questions. We will provide answers to those questions. And again, I'm presenting a pathway for the board to get there.
Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation potentially about North Charleston splitting out, which is a huge portion of the tax base for Charleston County School District. If they were to follow through with that, how would it affect this plan?
Well, the last press conference I gave was just about that, and I mentioned there that that very day that I did the press conference, that the mayor's office, Mayor Summers' office, and my office had arranged a meeting for Mayor Summers and for me and I to sit down and talk this through. It was a great meeting. He and I both recognized that a collaboration, a partnership between his city and school district is paramount. So there have been no further discussions that we have had in terms of of North Charleston leaving the district. In fact, it's next week. I don't know the date, but one day next week, on my staff and his staff, they're meeting to further talk about the details of improving our partnership. One of the things that the mayor and his team had talked about were the facilities. They talked, for an example, the track or the stadium up in North Charleston not having certain things that they thought should be there. In this meeting that I just left, the Art and Finance Committee, there's a recommendation to put funds into the D4 stadium to shore up those shortfalls or disparities that the mayor and his office have identified. So again, that partnership, we will work with them.
When it comes to the specific recommendation that you're making, other than the 14.5 to 9.1, why the 7.1 would you agree on?
Well, so I have to have a starting point. So there's lots and lots of numbers. There are realities to have to deal with. There are certain expenditures, teacher salaries as an example. They're the taxpayers that have to be sensitive to. So we all know taxes are a burden on us. And so I want to make sure that I'm representing both taxpayers, our teachers, and what the school board has to deliberate on.
50,000 starting teacher salary, how does that compare to the average starting salary for a four-year college graduate in this area?
Let's see. I don't know what year it was, and maybe Bill can jump in here. We had a salary study, a couple salary studies that were done, and the intent of those salary studies is to do what you're saying, a comparison, and so and what they call a market analysis to see where we are. In this case, we CCSD and all our categories of employees, where we were with the when we could compare to the market. So instead of coming into education and CCSD, if a person decides to go into another industry, where those salary differences are. And so some of our changes that we made, both in teacher salaries and in non-teacher salaries over the years, have been able to address those market conditions.
So what's the average for the somebody else going into manufacturing, whatever?
So Barney, it's hard for me to answer that question right now. I have 5 children. One is like a financial guy in investment banking. His starting salary was a lot higher than my youngest daughter, who was more of sort of like comparable to teaching. So it depends on what a person's interests are, number one, and then number two, the various industries pay different. Well, we do have alternative route pathways for.
Yeah, right.
We have time for one more question. Anyone else have one more question?
All right, thank y'all very much.
Thank you.